Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, we'll be taking a look at the DM's Guild supplement Halaster's Hoard, designed by Christopher Walz, Elise Cretel, Jeromy, Shulz-Arnold, Luke Monroe, and arranged by R.P. Davis for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to Platinum patrons Andrew, Brian, Richard, and Joe, and Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos, David, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, aka Cert2B, Adam, and Dead Lizard Lounge. Thank you all very much for your support. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage is still, as of this video, the most recent Wizards of the Coast adventure. I reviewed it when it came out. When was that? November or December. I believe this supplement came out very quickly after that, and I'm thinking that maybe it was produced even before maybe the authors even had the Mad Mage in their hands. I'm not quite sure what the timing is, but it happened very quickly, and to produce something of this much work and quality takes a while. So I'm guessing that maybe they didn't get quite as much information about the Mad Mage as they would have liked. That being said, it does include a lot of the enemies and traps and things are very thematic to the Mad Mage, which I was impressed by. So Halaster's Hoard is a bit of a shotgun blast of supplemental content designed specifically for Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It includes, let's see, I wrote this down, 80 pages of monsters, 30 pages of magic items, 6 pages of traps, and a Tier 3 mini-dungeon called Halaster's Vault. Just a shitload of content that you would want. Now, the Mad Mage, the Dungeon of the Mad Mage is already humongous. It is, I think, one of the biggest adventures Wizards of the Coast has done for 5th edition. Not necessarily all-encompassing, story-wise, certainly not, but just in terms of just raw dungeon crawling content, monsters and loot and all that stuff, it's humongous. There's 20 levels. It can take you from, I believe, level 5 to level 20. It's crazy. But if you're looking for more content, even more content, which there are little areas in the dungeon itself that have little side rooms, and it even says in the published book, hey, check out the DM's Guild for additional content to fill out these dungeons. And I reviewed another product that did exactly that, and this one, Halaster's Vault is one of those. It definitely adds on, but it's more about you can just populate any of these areas with just additional monsters. So if you just like, your crew likes killing monsters, I mean, they're in the middle of a dungeon, that's pretty much what you do. There's a lot to be found here. There's a lot of magic items, loot. The biggest issue is that Dungeon of the Mad Mage doesn't really have a cohesive theme the way a lot of the previously published adventures have. So Tomb of Annihilation has a jungle, pulpy adventure theme. Curse of Strahd obviously is very gothic horror. Princes of the Apocalypse is all elemental shit going on. So a lot of these have very easy themes to exploit for different supplements. I recently just reviewed one that was all about the Underdark and Out of the Abyss. So obviously there's a whole bunch of Underdark shit, Drow and Dwerger and Svdifner Nebula and all that stuff. Dungeon of the Mad Mage has everything. Like every level, it's almost like Layers of Hell, where every level is a different, almost like a different biome, a different region. There's like an underground forest. There's, I think, multiple underground rivers. There's like a bugbear fortress. There's a drow fortress. There's a whole cavern of ooze. There's a death trap that's run by an insane beholder. There's at one point a teleporter to an asteroid. It's very cool, but it's very crazy. It's just kind of, it's everything. Like it's just everything is in there. Every kind of dungeon crawling thing you could want, and then some. So what we have here is everything. It's just kind of a little bit of everything. Nice little mention to Stan Lee here, by the way. I guess this was written around the time that he published around the time that he passed. So when it comes to magic items and monsters, it's they could basically be used for everything, like any kind of generic fantasy dungeon. You could use any of these monsters or magic items, which is kind of a strength and a weakness. The weakness being it's just not very strongly themed for anything particularly. But the strength is you could easily use these in anywhere that you want. You don't have to limit them to Dungeon of the Mad Mage. But, it is marketed as Halaster's Hoard. It's kind of made for Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I don't know. I've mixed feelings about how this all comes together. The magic items themselves, for the most part, I like. The physical organization makes it maybe a little hard to read in that the flavor text is just slightly bolded, kind of on top with a different font. I do love that just about every single item here has a good chunk of flavor text that kind of describes what the item looks like and maybe where it was from, as a little backstory about it. There's almost too much of that. It gets a little wordy, to where some of these items have just multiple paragraphs and pages and pages and pages, or not pages, but yeah, lines and lines of just flavor text, and then the actual. If your flavor text is longer than your mechanics of how the item works, I don't know. That's given a little bit much. Some of them I do like quite a bit, but unless it's like a legendary artifact that has this ancient story and it's super powerful, I don't know if it really needs to be more than like a paragraph. I realize it's pretty nitpicky. Now, the ones that I really like, I can't go through all these. There's dozens and dozens of. I think. Let's see. Did I write down how many items there were? Over 80 items included here. It's a crap ton. They are organized by like rings and armor and weapons and that kind of thing. I love the ones. If Dungeon of the Mad Mage has any kind of theme, it's that it's a little bit goofy, because the Mad Mage himself is mad. He's insane, so a little bit of a Mad Hatter kind of, the inmates running the asylum. He's running this dungeon. He's just kind of goofy and weird. And I like that some of the items and monsters reflect that. I think those are the most memorable ones from this entire compendium. So, for example, I've hovering right now on the magic pants of invisibility, and this is a good example where literally it's this giant paragraph and then a one-line thing that says, while wearing these pants, only items covered by these pants are invisible. That's fucking funny. Like, that's really funny. It's a stupid, goofy magic item that's probably not going to work in any normal mechanics, but I think fun players could have a lot of fun role-playing that kind of item and just having fun with it and enjoying it. Let's see, there was I deleted item page annotations and I was going to use. Let's see, there's a jar of Clockwork Bees that you can throw. You can open the jar and summon 2 swarms of angry Clockwork Bees. That's pretty funny, I think. I wish you could throw it, actually, as you open the jar. I think it'd be funny to make that a jar that you throw. There is a... Oh, that's a good one. Let's see if I can find this one. Lordnall, it's an L. Wait. Oh, wait, it's under weapons, I believe. It was Lordnall's Bitchin' Magic Shuriken. Where is that? I think it's at the... There we go. Lordnall's Bitchin' Magic Shuriken. That is a great name. That made me laugh out loud when I read it, and it actually seems pretty cool. It has 7 charges. You can throw your shuriken, which multiplies into hundreds of duplicates in a 60-foot long, 10-foot wide line. Everybody has to make a dexterity saving throw or suffer 12d4 piercing damage. That's very delightful. I think the name is hysterical. Just a neat item. There's good stuff to be found here. They're really good magic items. I can't go over everything here, but I was generally impressed. God, there was this artifact it's this spell. This is the one, I think. What is this? The Codex Primordia. It's this spellbook with just insane requirements and insane ritual setup, but essentially you can ascend to godhood if you cast it, and it's kind of just crazy to me that there are like actual mechanics in here. I don't know how this was balanced at all. You have to make 3 DC 20 skill checks in a row. There's a DC 26 Constitution saving throw that if you fail, you immediately... Let's see. If they fail the saving throw, they're immediately reduced to 0 hit points, crumble to ash, and their soul is hurled into the depths of the astral plane to the graveyard of the dead gods, where it remains under the effects of an imprisonment spell. Holy crap, okay. Look at the component list, too. Arcane engines require at least 100,000 gold. You have to have the still living eye of an ancient red dragon, the final breath of a Dao Jin, Ifrit, and a Marid, 1,000 still beating mortal hearts. This is the 3 pounds of flesh from a dead god. Like, how did... Okay. That's just goofy. Like, is anybody actually use this thing? I don't know, but it's funny to read. I will say the artwork throughout here, and we'll get to the monsters in a second, is very impressive. There's a lot of different styles. There's some like kind of black and white like shader drawings, or some that are very nice, well put together like paintings. I appreciated a lot of the art in here. The variety that's in here is really cool. Like this axe right here looks freaking awesome. Flesh grinder, which makes an appearance in Halaster's vault. Halaster's dens is a really neat... I wish there were more of these, actually. These are not magic items. These are just magic areas that players can stumble upon and grant some kind of boon, kind of like a temporary magic zone. Like the Arcane Library, a wizard can pop in there and learn a new spell. There's a bed that reduces your long rest and short rest time, so everybody could clamor in for a long rest, which is... I mean, any adventurer who spends any time in D&D in a giant dungeon will think that is just the absolute best magical area of all time. Really neat. Some of them don't seem that would be very immediately useful, but I think that's just a neat boon. It's not necessarily an item that you give to a player, but just say, hey, you found either like the safe zone or this area that if you hang around with, or maybe make a skill check in, then you can do things. I kind of did that similarly with recently with our Tomb of Annihilation campaign, where they were able to the players are able to make potions by killing a hag and finding kind of a bunch of incomplete potions. So kind of a similar concept there, where you find this just magic area and you can give the players a reward that they don't necessarily take with them, although in the case of the potion making one, they can create something they can then take with them. So I do like that idea, though there's not a whole lot of them here. Monsters! There are so many monsters included here. Holy crap. There's everything. There's crystal scorpions, there's flying eyeballs, there's this bone spear insect thing that can anchor itself in the ground and shove its bone spears at you. There's algae people. There's just a ton of monsters, and unfortunately this is also where, as I said, the lack of the theme kind of rears its ugly monstrous head, in that there's just a little bit of everything. It almost just feels like a Volo's guide, or in terms of quality, I think it's really good. It's just that there's not as sharp of a theme as I've seen in other DM's Guild products that really stick to, okay, this is just like, this is a book of undead creatures, or this is a book of beasts, or this is a book of specifically like tundra dwelling monsters. Like those seem interesting if you've got a certain area that you need to fill out. But this one, it's just you're trying to fill out like so many different kinds of areas within Undermountain. The big advantage is the way they're organized is really, really well done. Each monster is divided up and given combat tactics, at least a paragraph for each of these. Combat tactics, their habitat and society, their place in the world, their ecology, or lack thereof, if they're some kind of undead or construct or something, and the best part, their role in Undermountain, which specifically says like what level of Undermountain they would be found in, or what they would be doing down there, which is helpful to tying everything into Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which, as I said, is one of the bigger weaknesses, because I just don't think Dungeon of the Mad Mage has a very clear theme. It's just kind of just a massive dungeon crawl of everything put together. It's the Neapolitan flavor of dungeon crawls, which can be very fun. This is the Pone Spear thing, really fucking cool looking. There's a ton of monsters here. There's a little bit of the humor here as well, which is nice. One of them is a particularly cross house cat, and I'm not even trying to be funny about describing it. That is literally the name of this creatures. I have to scroll all the way down. Some goblins, there's some gnomes, there's some crystal golems. A lot of these kind of play it safe with just taking, a creature from the Dungeon Masters Guild and then tweaking it slightly and making that a more just different flavored enemy, which is fine. That's what a lot of enemies are. Some of them feel very unique and original. That deep spawn I passed that has the different like tentacles has the ability to create its own army of thralls, because it like regurgitates creatures that it's consumed, and it can just create its own little army that it can rule a like level of the dungeon with, I suppose. Gnomish pygmy war rhino is a good example of a humorous animal. They've essentially bred these small rhinos that the gnomes can ride on, which is really freaking awesome. I love it. As I mentioned, really great art on some of these monsters. This is the boss of Halaster's Vault that appears later on, which is indeed a kind of anti-magic construct called a Griskull. Male Medusa here. Where was the one I was trying to find? The particularly cross house cat. Where was that one? That was somewhere in here. Nightshades can make shambling mounds, plant creatures. The carnivorous wall ooze is just basically an ooze that can ambush you from the wall, as far as I can tell. Which, okay, that's fine. Also present in Halaster's Vault. Halaster Vault, we'll get to that at the end, but is a neat showcase of a lot of these items and creatures. This palimpsest is a like a magical scroll that fucking kills you. It absorbs your soul in a really nasty way, to where it has rules about hey, they can be incredibly deadly because they absorb people, and then even if you destroy this thing, the person does not come back. They're trapped in the ethereal realm. So here's some skill checks to try to figure out how to save them. Like, oh god, that sounds awful. This is the particularly cross house cat I was trying to find. That's really funny. It says all these different abilities. It's a CR17. It totally is a joke monster that happens to be like super powerful, but I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, it's just a ton of monsters. They're good stuff. I like the way it's organized. I like the artwork here. It should not be limited to just Dungeons of the Mad Mage. This is just a good compendium of monsters, and that's mostly what. Well, I mean, it's got a lot of magic items too. It's just a lot of good magic items and a lot of good monsters, both ways. Trying to get down to traps. Traps helps rein in the theme a little bit, because other than, of course, a Serac with the Tomb of Horrors / now Tomb of Annihilation, the Mad Mage loves his traps. He's a trap master, and once again, kind of like Halaster's Den section, I wish this was a little bigger, because I think a lot of these traps are very inventive and clever, versus a lot of the monsters that I thought was more quantity over quality. Even though I do think they're well written, they're well organized, there weren't a lot of the monsters that really caught my attention, versus I think quite a bit of these traps actually caught my attention as being really fun and interesting. This Guillotine Door is going to make your players absolutely check the top of every door for the rest of their adventuring career. As you could say, they just open the door, shunk, a thing comes sliding down and does massive damage, because who the fuck looks up? Nobody looks up. It's just pretty funny. The let's see, the slippery stairs of Burning Death, another thing that's showcased in Halaster's Vault. Whenever they are on stairs, a bunch of oil goes down the stairs and just knocks everybody down. That doesn't seem too bad, but then the trap mentions, says, in addition, take careful note of lamps and torches. So if your players are obviously carrying a torch, as most players do at some point, because not everybody has dark vision, they will drop the torch if they fail that dex saving throw, and of course all of that oil will then light on fire, so now you're falling down, banging your way down the stairs, and you're on fire at the same time. That's why it's called the slippery stairs of Burning Death, which is pretty funny. I also like to stop hitting yourself. It uses like kind of a joke from like the Portal games, where there's something you want to hit from over there. You try to hit that thing, it's actually an illusion, and the arrow goes through a portal and comes back and hits you in the back of the head, which is also delightfully funny. Sticky bucket, literally it uses sovereign glue and a bucket for a player to step in, and then they're just stomping around in this bucket, which gives them disadvantage on initiative checks, on initiative rolls, dex saving throws, stealth checks, all that stuff. Although it does say it only lasts for basically until the next long rest, but that's a really funny way to use a trap. It's not deadly at all, it's just a pain in the ass, and it's a funny way for players to roleplay. I love a lot of these traps. I think they're really quite clever and fun. Halaster's Vault is I believe the final section of this already extremely lengthy. I just blazed through like 100 pages, by the way, of just dozens and dozens of magic items and monsters, which are all, for the most part, very well done. It is a Tier 3 dungeon, which means it is level, let's see, Tier 3 is 10 through 15, I believe. So a fairly high level dungeon. It says Best placed is one of the optional expanded dungeon areas on level 18 or 19, so maybe they shouldn't actually do it until a little further down the dungeon. In fact, I believe that has it in one of the final areas. It's got a really neat entrance where it's got this like dead statue of this dead tentacled god knocked over on its side, which has revealed this extra area. And it just does a good job of showcasing a lot of the monsters and traps and loot that we just looked at from the Halaster's Hoard supplement itself. So this beginning area uses a portal trap really cleverly. They see this open pit in front. Obviously, everyone's going to be stepping around it. As soon as they do, they teleport up to the top of the pit and fall face first into the spikes. That is amazing and hilariously cruel. Players will then be extremely paranoid about stepping around any pits. Right here, the staircase has that oil slippery staircase in there. There's the wall oozes at the corner. Stone golems just kind of randomly placed there here at 7, and then the final area has a Griskull at the top of this pyramid with a lot of alien shapes that can kind of fuck you up if you don't make your wisdom saving throw, and then the flesh grinder axe is your reward. I do like this style map. I'm not a fan of the Dyson Logos style at all. A lot of people seem to like it because I'm seeing it a lot lately. I'm not going to go into it too much because I've done that. I've complained about it to death in everything I've seen it in. It's not to my liking. I do like it when it's done in this 3/4 style, however. It just, when it's pulled back, this actually looks pretty nice, and it's really fun for me to... I mean, this looks like a very old style map, and I think those are really, really fun, but you can't use this when you're actually playing D&D. So for someone like me who plays on like a Roll20 that uses a battle map, this is not usable at all, and it's not something you can obviously show your players or anything. So for me as a DM to look at this, it's very helpful to know where everything is and get a feeling for the general size and ratio of everything. That's great, but I would have to then create an entire battle map, which sucks. I'm always going to complain about not having a battle map if there's a dungeon involved, and this one is small enough where I feel like there could have been this plus a nice overhead grid would have been really nice to have. But otherwise, I think it's a pretty good little mini dungeon. I mean, it does, it's not meant to be this big story-driven thing. It's just a death trap dungeon, and I think it does a good job of including different monsters and traps and elements that we just saw in the Halaster's Hoard supplement. At the very end, we do get one appendix that includes low-level loot, which at that point I think pretty much brings it over to probably over 100 magic items. This right here, by the way, I don't know why we needed this giant, ugly cutout. It looks really bad. Is this supposed to be a handout? Your players learn this phrase, and if they miss the phrase, then I believe that's when the stone golems attack them. I don't know why that needed to be a big white square here in the middle. It's very distracting. But anyway, the low-level loot, which this is very reminiscent of the in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, they added a bunch of common magic items. This is basically an expansion of those. It's a whole bunch of just kind of bullshit mundane items that might have a few uses, and that you can easily give them to tier 1 players, and it doesn't really do anything, or put that in as almost like trinket style loot that they can just find anywhere. It's odd that I'm finding this here because I'm pretty sure Dungeon of the Mad Mage starts at level 5 with the intent that you play it after Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is a tier 1, specifically just a tier 1 adventure, and then players can transition into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So at that point, I don't think you would really need any of these, although obviously you can include them just wherever. You could just, as part of like any kind of it's one of those where it's like a player wants to like steal something from somebody, or they want to loot a body and they roll like a crit, perception check or something, and the DMs is like, oh man, I got to give them something, but I don't want to really give them like an actual powerful magic item, and just finding gold or gems for the millionth time seems kind of boring. So then you could probably include something like this. It's nice to have. It's just I didn't really expect it here, especially after all the items we already got. The one complaint I do have, I wish in everything that uses multiple contributors, I would like to see the specific attributions made. So for and I realize that's a pain in the ass when you have this much content, but it would have been really nice to have after every magic item the name of the person who did that item as just a small note somewhere in there. Mainly so if I see a bunch of items or monsters and I'm noticing the ones that I like are by a certain author, then I can be like, oh, well, let me look up that author's other stuff because they are really in tune with the kind of content I'm looking for, or just the stuff that I like, or I just like the style or something. I think that can be really helpful as a way to follow up and look up more of these authors' work, rather than just say, hey, there's a bit at the beginning that's just like, oh, these are contributed by multiple people, and they're probably going to have different writing styles because multiple people wrote them, but it doesn't say like who contributed what or who wrote what. So that part is a bit of a bummer. I would have liked to see more attribution done. I realize that's a big asking when you have this much different content, and I don't really want it to be like this person. I don't want it to be organized that way. Like, I don't want it to be like this person did these magic items and these things. Just keep this organization, but just add the notes of what everybody did. I think would be a big undertaking, but really helpful to have in there, and nice for the authors too. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Halaster's Hoard. Pro, it's got a ridiculous amount of magic items and monsters. It is full of content, over 100 pages, over 100 magic items. Whoops. I don't know how many monsters, but dozens and dozens of pages of monsters. I didn't count the monsters, but there's a lot here, which is great. I think there are really inventive and interesting traps, as another pro, ranging from deadly to hilarious. If there is one theme that we can squeeze out of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, it is that it is a dungeon. So dungeons have traps, and a lot of dungeons don't use traps in very interesting or fun ways. They just do the usual, pit trap or needle trap or arrow trap. Or they do things that are like horrifically deadly and cruel, whereas this one I think finds a nice balance between all those things. Pro, every item and monster is given background information and flavor text. Monsters in particular are given detailed notes about their general livelihood and place in Undermountain. That last section is very important because it gives a reason why this creature was included in a supplement designed for a mega dungeon as Undermountain. So some of them are easier than others, like the plant people are going to be in the whatever that plant level, the underground forest dungeon level is called. If it's a necromancer, if it's a skeleton or something, maybe it'll be part of the necromancer's army who lives on whatever level. Others are a little more vague in that, like, oh, well, they'll just kind of be around in a dungeon, so it's not quite as useful. But that's also kind of the problem with Mad Mage, is it's just a big dungeon. Final pro, Halaster's Vault is a really nice mini dungeon that fits perfectly in a side room within the deeper levels of Undermountain. I do like having that there. I think it does a good job of showcasing a lot of the stuff from Halaster's Hoard, the way I've seen a lot of published material have mini adventures that include, what's a good example? I just reviewed Roll20 Xanathars, which included a Adventurers League adventure, which did a good job of showcasing a lot of those different subclasses. So it was a smart idea, I think, to have this be like, this is an example dungeon of the way that we've used traps, monsters, and magic items from Halaster's Hoard. But I think it's just a good one in general too. Cons, you can probably guess them by now. Undermountain lacks a cohesive theme, which leads to this supplement mostly feeling like a generic list of dungeon-ready monsters and loot. That's not necessarily Halaster's Hoard's fault. It shows Mad Mage as the one it wants to use, and the Mad Mage dungeon itself is the one that really lacks the theme, and this one also lacks the theme, which is kind of what themes it. I don't know, it's kind of weird. I am putting that as a con because it's just not, mainly because like not every monster and item felt like, okay, this is specifically going in like this level. It just really, they kind of feel like they're just generic dungeon monsters, which that is kind of what Dungeons of the Mad Mage is. Other con, as I mentioned at the very end, no attribution of which authors contributed which items, monsters, or designs. I would have liked to see that, just so you can look up and see, oh man, this person, I really like the way they had these several magic items in there, and I want to see more of what they did. Final verdict, featuring a huge amount of fun, varied magical items, monsters, and traps, Halaster's Hoard is a supplement that even the Mad Mage himself would approve of. Thank you for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.